Hello everyone and welcome back to another deck guide, this time featuring both of the premier trap monster archetypes, Odion and Argostars. These are both control decks that focus on gaining repeated value from their cards, with Odion recycling from the grave and the Argostars bouncing back and forth between trap and monster to repeatedly trigger their own effects. So, if you think you might enjoy trap monsters as much as I do, let's begin. So the experienced among you might be wondering, wait, don't both of these decks take up a ton of board space? How do you manage to fit everything? And you'd be right, each of these decks played pure take a lot of board space in both the front and back row, so they don't tend to play well with others. However, the reason that this deck works despite that fact is simple. The main conceit of the deck is that the Odion engine can get you to full Argostars end board with a couple of extra disruptions. So we're not necessarily trying to fit both decks end board, since it wouldn't, but to squeeze more value out of each individual piece in a surprisingly synergistic way. Starting with the Odion engine, Man with the Mark here is the core of the deck's strategy. He's a level 4 normal summon that grabs you any of the temple spell or traps. There's only two here, being the field spell Treasures of the Kings and the continuous spell Temple of the Kings, but Man is our best starter and gives us the most material to work with, which is why we play 6 copies. Anubis the Last Judge has a few jobs, but the most important one is very simple: discard itself to fetch Man with the Mark. It can also summon itself back from grave by putting traps back into the deck so that we can search them up and use them again. That also just gives us a 3000 body to end the game quickly on turn 2 and beyond. Its last job is to serve as the cost for our last Odion main deck monster, Circuit. Circuit is a searchable extender that has to be summoned while you have either Temple or Treasures of the Kings on board, and by banishing a level 10 or higher monster from deck. So we banish a copy of Anubis, summon the Circuit, and then we can use it to search either Temple or Treasures, whichever one we don't already have. It's just kind of also wins battle for some reason. It destroys a monster at the start of the damage step and gains all of the attack of that monster, so it can redeclare attack at something else with the empowered amount that it has, which is cool and comes up pretty regularly for me. Speaking of Temple of the Kings, this is an old continuous spell that lets you activate one trap that was set this turn per turn. That lets us use our traps as extra deck material, but also lets us do some degenerate things we'll talk about later. I know you've been looking at that extra deck. For our only other Odion spell, we have Treasures, which is a field spell that sets one of our Apophis traps when you activate it. Then you can use its ignition effect as long as you have either a trap in grave or 2 set cards, trivial to accomplish for us, and for the trouble, you get to add any of our Odion monsters to hand once per turn. This card is so important because it's one of the only extenders available to the engine, as well as representing 2 materials on its own. That's why we play 4, including the limited Terraforming to search it. Then we have the Apophis traps, starting with Serpent, which summons itself as a level 4 and sets the other trap from deck. Importantly, the trap that you set off of its effect can be activated this turn. We can use this the turn we set it thanks to Temple of the Kings, which makes us a very important rank 4 with the Odion himself after setting Swamp Deity for us. Swamp Deity is a level 6 instead of a level 4 and is a non-targeting negate for cards on field. It's a super strong interrupt that we can also use as material and recycle with Anubis. Next we're on to the Argostars engine, starting with again the most important card in the archetype, Glorious Adra. Adra is a starter and a good normal summon, but not as good as Man with the Mark, so we play it at 2 since we can easily go through 2 of her in a turn cycle. We prefer to summon her using the Odion engine, and she's got a ton of effects. First up, after being normal summoned, the opponent can't respond to your trap cards for the rest of the turn. Half a Branded Lost is a pretty good start. Next up, she can banish herself to set, face up, 2 Argostars traps from deck. This just gives you the whole engine on its own and it reads crazy. The issue is just that she's vulnerable to Imperm and Veiler, and those stop the whole engine from going off since they have no real good extenders. That's why Odion's here. Her last effect is to banish herself from hand to make an opponent's attack 0 until end phase. This can be used during the damage step, so she's basically just honest on top of everything else. She's the only main deck Argostars monster we play, so we're on to the spells. Stadium is our field spell that we want to end on, letting us pay 1000 to add back an Argostars card from grave or banish, which gives us a lot of recursive value. It also burns for 500 every time we summon a trap monster, which can add up over a couple of turns. This is a control deck after all. Lastly, it's got a slow and not once per turn negate. This is one of the most skill-intensive cards I've seen to actually use well, since it negates in a new chain when a trap monster activates an effect in the monster zone. So you can negate ignition effects pretty easily before the opponent can even activate them, but you have to do some really weird timing and predicting things to negate triggered effects. You'll see that in the games later. It still puts in a lot of work in the deck, but we just play the one since it's not a starter, and it's mostly just an end board piece, and it's very, very searchable. Speaking of one-up spells, Giant Slaying is actually a starter because it just searches Adra, but again we want to open the Odion stuff, not the Argostars stuff, if we can. This just adds Adra from deck to hand, and if we have a trap monster, say the Odion ones, we can immediately normal summon her and do the whole Argostars line. This can also be banished from grave to bounce 2 cards, but despite it being a quick play, you can only do that on your main phase, so it's not a great disruption, and it's mostly just here to search and summon Adra. Lastly, our traps, starting with Tideu. All the Argostars have a passive effect in the back row, and can summon themselves from back row to the front row, or when already a monster, can pop back into the back row to dodge, removal, and trigger our field spell. Tideu's passive effect is to pump all of our warriors, which is all of the Argostars, by 500 attack, and when summoned you have to discard a card, but you can search any Argostars card so you end up net neutral. Capane has the weakest monster effect, but the most annoying back row effect that has won me multiple games, by making your warriors indestructible by battle. All of our stuff's pretty small, so just having like bodies clogging up the field when people are trying to actually kill us puts in a surprising amount of work. To summon her, you have to already have a trap monster on the field, and if you do, and then you also have a banished Argostars monster, you gain 500 life. A lot of the Argostars stuff requires you to have already banished a monster like the field spell negate, Capane, and then our last trap, Etio. Etio makes your warriors indestructible by card effects, and then can only special summon herself when the opponent activates a card or effect, but comes with a non-targeting bounce. That's just good disruption, but can also bounce your own cards to save something from targeted removal, or heavens forbid, evenly matched. Then we have a few honorary Argostars, starting with That's 10. This is a wacky little continuous spell that gains a counter every time a card or effect is activated, whether yours or your opponent's. All of your monsters gain 100 attack per counter, so they get big. But more importantly, once it hits 10 counters, it bounces back to your hand and sets a trap monster from deck that is immediately live. This is kind of weird, unsearchable extension, but with our next card also acts as a circuit breaker if you get interrupted and have to just pass on it. Your Finished is a crazy strong but unwieldy card. It can only activate if 10 cards or effects have been activated during the current turn, but it special summons itself as a 3000 attack level 10 body and sets itself during your next end phase. While it's a monster though, if your opponent activates a single card or effect, you can destroy their entire board. Not just monsters, not just face-ups, everything. Then you can set her back face down. The combination of these 2 cards allow you to stop a long-winded combo deck in its tracks, even if you have nothing else going on for you. But your Finished is quite situational, so we just play the one to search when we need it. Lastly for our engine is one Statue of Anguish pattern, affectionately known as the Dirt Spider. So Dirt Spider is an old trap monster that can't be targeted as long as you have another trap monster on field, and every time you summon one, you can targeted destroy a card on the field. This is not once per turn, so you can normally pop 2 to 3 cards per turn with this alone. As for non-engine, I've been leaning away from hand traps in general lately, so we're playing mostly a board breaker suite. This also helps the Odion package by putting traps in the grave before we start comboing. Droll's still really good right now, so it's the only hand trap that remains, but otherwise we're trying to Dark Ruler in evenly the opponent to simplify the board, which is where we as a control deck shine. Before we get into the extra deck, I want to talk about the sideboard here. So the Argostars can make a rank 4 easily, which can be Gallant Granite. Granite can search a rock. That means it can search Lord of the Heavenly Prison, which is just a trap deck staple. This guy can reveal from hand to make all of your set cards indestructible while he's revealed, and as soon as a set card is activated, he summons to field and then sets any trap from deck. That lets us, on the opponent's draw phase, set any floodgate, and then use Temple of the King's effect to immediately activate it. This is as brutal as it sounds, since doing so doesn't even reduce the strength of our end board. We still end with everything we normally would. There are a couple of problems, though. Space is a big one. Lord is a body on our field that doesn't do anything after he sets a trap, which reduces our maneuverability, which can be problematic. The other is that we just don't know which floodgate to set during game 1, so rather than main deck this package, I would sideboard it and bring it in games 2 or 3 when you know what floodgate to hit the opponent with to maximize their sorrow. Outside of that, you can just play a bunch of specific hand traps for various matchups and then side out mostly the board breakers, and that's 10. We don't actually use the extra deck a ton here, so it's mostly just options. Link Spider lets us turn an Odion trap, which counts as a normal monster, into an effect monster. That means we can use it to summon Silhouette Rabbit. Rabbit sets any trap monster on summon, and then sticks around to pop a back row when you summon one from the back row to a monster zone. IP, SP, and Gorgon here are for fringe cases, and if you grind for multiple turns and just need something to turn bodies into. Goddesses are out to towers. Apophis can be made by contact fusing 2 Apophis traps and lets you reset those traps from the grave to use them again. It can also pop a card when a trap monster is summoned. We just do a lot of that in general. It also happens to be a level 6, which is relevant in this deck. Arion is our bridge into the Argostars engine. You can make it with any 2 level 4s, here being Apophis the Serpent and Odion himself, or any 1 Argostars monster. We want to make it with Man with the Mark and Serpent because that lets us search an Argostars spell, which is going to be Giant Slaying, and then because you at that point have a Swamp Deity on board, Giant Slaying lets you get an extra normal summon of the Adra that you just searched. That lets you access the whole line. But you don't always want to use this as material afterwards because she does have a second effect. If she sticks around until the standby phase, you can detach 2 materials to place all of your Argostars trap from the grave onto the field. So that means you can leave her on the board, use all of your Argostars as material for like Granite and Silhouette, and then get them back on the opponent's turn anyways, which is pretty neat. Baguska is an option to slow the game down if we get stopped. Lars can be made with a few 6s that we have access to, and can negate any card on the field. Notably, he works during battle phase unlike Swamp Deity, so we can stop evenly with him. Typhon is better in trap decks than in anything else since we can back him up with negates and bounces, and Zeus clears up stagnant board states. The last thing I want to note before we get into combos is that most of the extra deck is flexible, and you can actually make this deck quite cheap if you wanted to make it a budget option. Technically, we only need 1 Silhouette Rabbit. Technically, we don't actually need the Zeus. It doesn't come up terribly often. Same thing with Gorgon of Ziliphthonia, or Ziliphthonia Gorgon. Same thing with SP, so this is kind of what I would consider the minimum to make the deck work, and it's only $13 in the extra deck, so you can cheapen it up quite a bit. But with that, guys, let's go ahead and get into some combos. Baseball. Alright, so for our first combo, this is going to be our bread and butter. You can start with Anubis or Man with the Mark, and then any card to set and any 1 card to discard. I'm just using 2 evenly as it fills both spaces. So, we're going to discard Anubis to search Man with the Mark, then we can normal summon Man with the Mark to go grab Treasures. Treasures is going to then be able to set Apophis the Serpent from deck, and then we have to have a card to set so that we can access the second part of Treasures to go get Circuit. We can then banish another Anubis to summon the Circuit to search Temple. Activate Temple, which lets us activate Serpent this turn, which can then set Swamp Deity. Still activatable this turn. Our 2 4s go into Arion, which grabs us Giant Slaying, and then we can activate that Swamp Deity so we have a trap monster, so when we search the Adra, we can immediately normal summon her. We can then use Adra's effect to set both Taidu and Kapain, and our 6s go into Lars for protection. We can then summon Taidu, grab the field spell, summon Kapain because we have Taidu on board, use both of them to go into Rabbit to set Dirt Spider. We can add back the Giant Slaying as discard fodder for next turn, go to the opponent's standby, detach 2 from Arion, which lets us bring back both the Taidu and Kapain, and this is what our end board looks like. So we've got something to discard for Taidu. We can immediately activate Statue of Anguish pattern, which can pop like 1.5 million cards. Actually, it gets 2 pops on this one, Silhouette's another one, so that's 3 destructions total. Lars is a fast negate and can deal with evenly, and for anything ignition speed, we have 4 triggers of Home Stadium. So we've got like 5 negates and 3 pops on this board, which is pretty good. Sports. So the only other combo I wanted to show you is the abbreviated one you can do if you start with just Adra. She's technically a starter, and she gets you through the full Argostars line, but the full Argostars line is a little bit lackluster, so we prefer the Odion stuff. Either way, here we go. Normal summon Adra, mandatory effect so that the opponent cannot respond to our traps for the rest of the turn. Then we can use her effect to set both Taidu and Kapain, summon the Taidu, which grabs us Giant Slaying and lets us normal summon another Adra. That's why we play 2. We can then summon Kapain, to overlay Kapain into Arion so that we can get the field spell, use 2 to go into Silhouette Rabbit, which can set Dirt Spider, and then the field spell can grab us back the Kapain. So we don't keep Arion on this board because we don't use 2 materials, so we can't get 2 materials back. Namely because we only have the 2 monsters, like, we just don't have enough materials to keep Arion on board and go into Silhouette Rabbit here. So the way we do this, we end up with 3 pops and 4 slow negates. I mean, it's misleading to say 4 negates because they're not like Omni negates. It's not like you've got Verones. But against a deck like Malice, which we have a surprisingly good matchup into, slow negates put in a lot of work. So this is still pretty respectable as far as disruptions, not nearly as good as the Odion line. And we're back with closing thoughts on our Argostars Odion deck. So our first pro is just that I really enjoy trap monster decks, I've realized in recent months, with playing the Odion package. There's something about 1-for-1ing an opponent repeatedly and gaining extra value out of that that is missing from something like, say, Labyrinth or Paleo, where you're just trying to do big explosive traps that just blow the opponent up. I guess that's why I've always enjoyed trap tricks to some extent, because it's more of 1-for-1, I just get value out of doing so, and I like that a lot more. As far as actual pros, the Gallant Granite being able to use Lord of the Heavenly Prison to immediately search and activate any floodgate is absolutely insane, and there's an argument to be made to pick whichever floodgate is best for the meta right now and just play this main deck, maybe over That's 10. I like That's 10, I'm gonna be honest, it's kind of fun to play with, but it's maybe like just unreliable along with your finished, and maybe those should come out. But you have to think that That's 10 is technically a +1. It's the world's slowest, clunkiest Pot of Greed, because on activation it sets the card you need, then bounces to hand for you to either use it again or just discard as discard fodder. So it is a good card, it's just really weird to use. And lastly, I just want to mention, I know the community thinks like Argostars is kind of a joke. I think this is probably the best build of Argostars. If you find their playstyle, like me, fun, but understand that they're just not the best deck, I think this is probably the most competitive way that you can actually play this archetype. I've tried them with a few things, obviously I tried Punk and other things. Because Arion can search Giant Slaying, you can always search a starter if you can get into 2 level 4s. The problem is, if you don't have a trap monster on field, that starter requires your normal summon, which reduces its flexibility greatly. This gets a lot better in Master Duel because we have MX Saber Invoker, which is just 2-3, slap it together, special summon Adra from deck. That makes the package quite a bit better. You can play Terror Top and other level 3 engines and things like that. But in the TCG, this is definitely the best we've got, and even if we had MX Saber Invoker, I kind of feel like this might remain the best we have. But anyways, that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you liked it, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.